Have you ever walked into a place that used to feel so familiar, only to find that sense of belonging is gone? I'm talking about something small, a roadside diner, a corner cafe, a place you once called home, even if it was just in your heart, a place with the comforting smell of coffee in the early morning, the familiar laughter of a server who always remembered you took your coffee without sugar, a place with an old owner whose footsteps still moved steadily, like a clock keeping time for the entire town. But then one day, you come back, and it's not the same anymore. The chairs are still there, the lights are still warm and yellow, the menu still carries the same old names. But something's different. The windows are smudged with dust, the servers avoid eye contact, and the way people talk, hushed, hesitant. You don't sense it from the sounds themselves, but from the absence of something deeply important, kindness. I once witnessed that moment. It was on a winter afternoon, the cold so sharp it felt like it could slice your skin. Outside, an old, thin man shivered inside a worn-out coat, standing there, peering into a family diner where warm yellow lights spilled out, almost beckoning him inside. Inside, a young man was hustling between tables, carrying plates in his hands, a smile still on his face. Just another server, like so many others. But there was something different about him. His name was Liam Parker, 26 years old, a community college student, working there for 5 years. There was nothing flashy about him, no titles, no big achievements, no articles written about him. But there are people like him, who live quietly, silently, preserving the best parts of this world with small, simple acts. Liam didn't know that on that freezing day, when he took off his uniform jacket and draped it over the shoulders of that stranger. He was changing the fate of that place and of himself. He also didn't know that the man with trembling hands and a sparse grey beard was not just another homeless man. He was Harold Bennett, the founder of the very diner where Liam was working, the man everyone thought had retired due to failing health, the man who was coming back not to sit at his usual table with a morning coffee, but to disguise himself as a stranger, quietly observing, trying to understand what had happened to the place he once considered his life's work, Bennett's Diner. And what he saw hurt him more deeply than the heart attack that almost claimed his life. This is not just a story about a diner. It's a story about nameless kindness, about a young man brave enough to live kindly in silence, and about an old man who chose to trust in people one more time. I can't promise you'll cry, but I believe you'll remember. There are people who walk into our lives so gently, but leave an imprint that can never be erased. If you're ready, join me in stepping into a story that, I believe, is closer to your daily life than you might think. Have you ever walked into a place that used to feel so familiar, only to find that sense of belonging is gone? I'm talking about something small, a roadside diner, a corner cafe, a place you once called home, even if it was just in your heart, a place with the comforting smell of coffee in the early morning, the familiar laughter of a server who always remembered you took your coffee without sugar, a place with an old owner whose footsteps still moved steadily, like a clock keeping time for the entire town. But then one day, you come back, and it's not the same anymore. The chairs are still there. The lights are still warm and yellow. The menu still carries the same old names. But something's different. The windows are smudged with dust. The servers avoid eye contact. And the way people talk hushed, hesitant. You don't sense it from the sounds themselves, but from the absence of something deeply important: kindness. I once witnessed that moment. It was on a winter afternoon. The cold so sharp it felt like it could slice your skin. Outside, an old, thin man shivered inside a worn-out coat, standing there, peering into a family diner where warm yellow lights spilled out, almost beckoning him inside. Inside. A young man was hustling between tables, carrying plates in his hands, a smile still on his face. Just another server, like so many others. But there was something different about him. His name was Liam Parker, 26 years old, a community college student, working there for 5 years. There was nothing flashy about him, no titles, no big achievements, no articles written about him. But there are people like him, who live quietly, silently, preserving the best parts of this world with small, simple acts. Liam didn't know that on that freezing day, when he took off his uniform jacket and draped it over the shoulders of that stranger. He was changing the fate of that place and of himself. He also didn't know that the man with trembling hands and a sparse grey beard was not just another homeless man. He was Harold Bennett, the founder of the very diner where Liam was working. The man everyone thought had retired due to failing health. The man who was coming back not to sit at his usual table with a morning coffee, but to disguise himself as a stranger, quietly observing, trying to understand what had happened to the place he once considered his life's work, Bennett's Diner. And what he saw hurt him more deeply than the heart attack that almost claimed his life. This is not just a story about a diner. It's a story about nameless kindness, about a young man brave enough to live kindly in silence, and about an old man who chose to trust in people one more time. I can't promise you'll cry, but I believe you'll remember. That afternoon was colder than usual, the kind of cold that cuts into your bones not just from the winter wind, but from the chill of a place that was once warm, now turned cold. Liam had just finished his lunch shift and was getting ready to move into the dinner service. His shoes were soaked from the slush outside, and each breath turned into small clouds in the icy air. He kept smiling as he checked on a regular customer, even as Ryan's harsh voice echoed from the kitchen behind him. Then he saw him. An old man standing outside, shivering in a tattered coat. His cheeks were red from the biting wind, hands clasped tightly to his chest, trying to hold on to whatever warmth was left. His eyes looked through the glass, into the warm glow and the scent of bacon drifting out from the kitchen. No one paid him any mind. No customer said a word. No employee mentioned him. Only Liam. And something in his heart squeezed. He hurried over to the counter, quietly saying to Ryan, "Hey, that man outside looks really cold. He probably doesn't have anywhere to go. Can we let him sit inside for a bit? I'll pay for his coffee." Ryan glanced up from his phone and scoffed. "This is a restaurant, not a charity shelter. If you want to play saint, use your own money. Guys like that just make the paying customers uncomfortable." Liam bit his lip. He didn't want to start a fight, but something in Ryan's voice today made it impossible to swallow a raw, unhidden disdain for people. "It's just a cup of coffee. It's below 15 out there. Then tell him to go somewhere else. Not our problem. And if you care so much about those homeless people, then you can quit. We don't need you here." Sometimes a single sentence is the last drop that makes the cup overflow. Not because it's so cruel, but because it exposes a truth that kindness is no longer valued in this place. Liam didn't answer. He placed the check from table 9 on the counter, turned, and walked out through the side door. The wind tossed his hair. His nose turned red almost instantly. But that didn't matter. "Hi, sir. Are you cold?" Liam's voice was gentle, careful not to startle the old man. The old man looked up, his cloudy eyes holding a strange sharpness, perhaps from the reflection of the lights inside, or maybe because he wasn't who he appeared to be. "It's pretty cold, but I'll be fine," the man replied, his voice shaking. "Here, please take this. I don't have much, but this jacket will help keep you warm." Liam took off his uniform jacket. It wasn't thick, just a black blazer with the Bennett's logo. But it was far better than the thin rags the old man wore. "I work in the kitchen, so I don't need heavy layers. Please wear it to stay warm. And, if you don't mind, I'll bring you something hot to eat later." "Okay." The old man froze for a moment. Then, slowly, he reached out, carefully, as if afraid to damage such a precious gift. "Thank you, young man. Not many people do this anymore." Liam smiled, a shy, slightly embarrassed smile. "I just think, if my grandpa was still alive, I'd hope someone would treat him the same." He turned and walked back inside, not knowing that the old man's eyes were still watching him, deeply and quietly. There are people who choose to live quietly in the background their entire lives. They don't need the spotlight. They don't need applause. But when they stand up, no one else can stay seated. Harold Bennett was one of those people. 30 years ago, he was a high school English teacher, living simply, carefully, and a bit stubbornly in the way older folks believe in doing the right thing, even if no one notices. After his mother passed, he used the small inheritance she left him to open a little roadside diner, something his friends called a crazy idea at retirement age. But he didn't care. He didn't open the diner to get rich. He opened it to build something warmer, a place where lonely elderly folks weren't seen as a nuisance, a place where you could order your usual without having to speak the words, a place where, no matter what the world outside was like, when you stepped inside, you were greeted by your name. He had done this for 30 years, every single day. He was there at 5 a.m. He would taste the coffee himself, wipe down the counters, check the ovens, and was always the last to leave after everything was neatly in place. Every Christmas, he personally handed out small gifts to each employee, not cash in envelopes, but something personal, a book, a handwritten letter, or a scarf he had knitted himself. People called him the soul of Bennett's diner. But then, 6 months ago, a sudden heart attack changed everything. Doctors told him to rest. At least 6 months. No stress. Stay away from the diner. That's what they said, and he tried to listen, though deep inside, he knew he had left something important behind without preparing someone to carry it forward. At that time, Ryan, his own nephew, volunteered to take over. "I'll make you proud, Grandpa," Ryan said, eyes bright with excitement, holding a thick financial plan in his hand. Harold wasn't sure, but he wanted to believe. After all, it was his grandson. Who wouldn't want to give their family a chance? So he nodded, handed over the keys, stepped back, and the price of that trust he would soon have to pay. 6 months away from the diner. But Harold was still watching, through accounting invoices, financial reports, through phone calls from old customers asking why the coffee tasted so bitter now, and why Sarah, the employee who hadn't missed a day in 12 years, left without saying goodbye. He saw revenue drop, strange expenses appear, resignation letters pile up. But what worried him most wasn't the numbers, it was the signs of a spirit lost. One afternoon, his old friend Martha, the accountant who had been with him since day one, looked at him over a cup of tea and said, "Harold, if you don't go see it with your own eyes, you're going to lose it forever." So, the two of them made a plan, a strange, risky plan. But the only way to see the truth when people thought he was no longer watching. The day he stepped out of his house, covered in dusty makeup, a fake beard glued on with professional adhesive, and an old, threadbare coat. He felt like he was back acting in the local church play, except this time the play was real. He sat on a bench across from the diner, in the winter wind, the cold cutting through his thin layers. No one recognized him. No employees glanced at him for more than a second, except for Liam. And when Liam took off his jacket, placed it over Harold's shoulders without asking his name, without needing to know who he was, and said softly, "You need this more than I do." He knew in that exact moment the most important answer he was looking for was right there. It wasn't about who was in charge. It was about who was holding on to kindness in a place that was slowly turning cold. That night, Harold didn't sleep. He sat in his old kitchen at home, holding a cup of hot tea, his heart heavy. The wind howled outside the window, but inside he felt warm knowing there was still a young person, willing to give without expecting anything in return. No one knew, but from that very moment Harold had begun to return, quietly, but clearly. And this time he wasn't coming back to manage. He was coming back to see if he could pass down this legacy to someone who deserved it. Some investigations don't begin with sirens or flashing red lights. They begin with silence, with the sad eyes of an aging employee, with sighs in the corners of the kitchen, with the smell of burnt coffee seeping into the cracks of a diner that had once been a refuge for many tired souls. Harold sat there in the role of an anonymous old man, holding a cheap cup of coffee, looking out at the space he once knew by heart. But now, the place felt painfully unfamiliar. The windows no longer shone. The employees' uniforms were wrinkled, and the smiles on the servers' faces, if there were any left, were nothing more than thin masks. He took notes, not with pen and paper, but with the heart of a man who had once cared for every brick, every tablecloth in that place. Ryan, the one who used to call him Uncle H, now showed up at 10 a.m., while shifts started at 7. Jenny, a single mother, once the backbone of the morning shift, now had her hours constantly cut because the diner was overstaffed. Sarah, the hostess for over 12 years, was replaced by a younger woman simply because she looked better on security cameras. Carlos, a veteran chef, was left to cook alone for double shifts without help, only to be complained about because the food was too slow. Harold didn't write down their names in a notebook. He recorded them in his heart, with every tired bow of the head, with the whispers exchanged between tables. Don't let Ryan see you standing still for too long. Did you hear they're cutting hours again today? He took my tips yesterday, but I'm too scared to say anything. This was no longer his diner. It felt like a factory where people survived but did not live. He doesn't understand, Harold thought, his eyes settling on Ryan, laughing with a group of young friends at the counter. It's not revenue that keeps customers coming back. It's the way you make them feel welcome. He looked at Liam, still like a small light in a dim room. Liam still checked in with every person, still greeted customers by name, still bent down to pick up a napkin dropped by a child, quietly bringing out a cookie as a little reward. He didn't protest loudly. He didn't wave banners. But that's why Harold noticed him even more. One afternoon, Harold witnessed Ryan refusing to warm up a bottle of milk for a young mother. That's not part of the diner's service, Ryan said, bluntly. Doing that violates health codes. But as soon as Ryan walked away, Liam stepped into the kitchen, quietly placed the bottle in the microwave, checked the temperature carefully, and brought it back out, without a single complaint. Another time, Ryan snapped at an old man for asking about the menu 3 times. "Are you deaf or something?" Ryan had said. Liam turned to him, bowed his head, apologized, and quietly took the man's order, remembering exactly how he liked his meal. Harold saw it all. One time, Martha, the accountant friend, asked him, "Are you looking for someone to replace you? Or someone like you?" Harold smiled. "No one is like me, but I need someone who understands why I did what I did." Then he started going further, not just sitting in the diner, but visiting the pharmacy where Sarah now worked as a cashier. When he asked, pretending to be an old customer, why she wasn't at Bennett's anymore, she fell silent for a long moment before saying, "He told me. I was too old to work the front. 12 years, not a single day missed. But being old became an inconvenience." The next day, he found Michael, the chef, who had once created the special dishes customers loved. Now, he worked at a bland chain restaurant, the spark gone from his eyes. "Ryan wanted me to use canned sauces. I refused. You know the rest." Harold nodded, a lump in his throat. Good people don't need much, they just need to be respected. And when you take that away, they lose themselves. A week passed. He had seen enough, heard enough, felt enough. And most of all, he knew if he didn't act, he would lose not just a diner, but a community that needed a place to believe in. But he wasn't angry. He didn't hold hate. He just felt sadness and resolve. I've seen what happens when someone with power lacks kindness, but I've also seen what goodness can endure because of someone kind who holds no power at all. There was one truth Harold believed in throughout his years in business: trust is given, but truth must be verified. And when he saw Ryan pocketing cash from the register, thinking no one was watching, Harold knew it was time to stop trusting blindly. Old age hadn't slowed Harold down, it had only made him more careful. With Martha's help, the woman who had done his accounting for 3 decades, he started collecting evidence. Quietly, calmly, no outbursts, just turning on a camera. A small camera was hidden in an old knit cap. Placed just above his eyebrows, no one noticed an old man trembling, sipping coffee with his hat pulled low in the winter. But that camera captured the raw truth. Ryan taking cash from the register, never recording it. Ryan drinking alcohol behind the counter during shifts, hidden in a coffee cup. Ryan yelling at and belittling employees in front of customers. Ryan closing the diner early to throw private parties, using the diner's alcohol, bringing in friends to dance, with things happening that had no place in any legitimate restaurant. That night, Harold sat in his car holding a cup of coffee, watching from across the street. Through the zoom lens, he saw every gesture, every fake smile, every blurry figure behind the windows, strangers in a diner that once only served people who called each other by name. He's not just destroying this place's reputation, he's draining its soul. The next morning, Harold returned still in the role of the trembling old man with a $1 hot coffee, though he was the man who had once paid every paycheck in that place. Ryan still shouted from the counter, "What's that old guy doing here again, sitting around taking up space from paying customers?" The words weren't loud, but they were enough to make Harold's heart tighten. That same morning, he saw Liam wiping down tables earlier than usual, hands tired but never stopping. Carlos walking into the kitchen, dark circles under his eyes, still washing his hands before cooking, a habit that had become an ethical promise. Harold recorded it all, but what touched him most deeply was not what was caught on camera. One afternoon, Jenny, the single mother who always worked double shifts, asked to leave early because her son had a high fever. Ryan looked her in the eye and said, "If you walk out now, don't bother coming back. I'm not here to babysit your family problems." No one said anything. No one dared say anything. The whole diner went silent, except for Liam, carrying a tray of food, who stopped. He turned to Ryan, his voice quiet but firm. "I'll take Jenny's shift. She needs to be with her son. And who do you think you are? Stepping in on management," Ryan shouted. "I'm just an employee, but I know real leaders aren't the ones who give orders. They're the ones who listen." Harold heard that, and he felt something warm in his chest. Not anger, but faith, clearer than ever. There are moments that seem small, but they become the final line, not because they are grand, but because they are another cut into a wound that has been bleeding for too long. That afternoon, the sky was as grey as a crumpled piece of paper. The wind tore through the bare branches, slapping against the smudged windows of Bennett's diner. No one cleaned them anymore the way Mr. Harold used to every morning. Liam was still hustling between tables, but his shoulders had begun to sag. In the kitchen, Carlos couldn't stop coughing from food left overnight without proper care. Jenny, the quiet single mother, looked visibly exhausted, and then her phone buzzed. It was the school calling. Max has a 102-degree fever. He's unresponsive in the nurse's office. No one can come pick him up. Jenny's hands shook as she walked to the counter, where Ryan sat scrolling on his phone, twirling a shiny gold ring on his finger. Ryan. I'm so sorry. The school called. My son has a high fever. I need to leave 30 minutes early. Angela said she could watch my tables. She didn't even get to finish before Ryan cut her off. His voice sharp. Making excuses again. How many times have I told you don't bring your kid problems into work? Jenny froze. I'm not making it up. He really has a fever. I'm just asking for 30 minutes. What do you think this is? A daycare? Ryan slammed the seating chart onto the counter. If you can't handle the pressure, don't bother coming back. The crowded diner fell suddenly. Silent. A few customers turned to look. An elderly woman shook her head, placing her fork and knife down on her half-eaten toast. Jenny stood there, clutching her phone, eyes red with tears. No one said a word. No one. Except Liam. He set his tray down, walking slowly toward the counter as if each step carried all the pent-up frustration he had swallowed for months. He didn't yell. He didn't lose control. He just spoke, his voice low and steady. Jenny. Go get your son. I'll take care of the rest. Ryan spun around, furious. What did you just do? I'm the manager here, not you. Liam didn't back down. For the first time in so long, he met Ryan's eyes without flinching, without fear. Being a manager doesn't mean being heartless. Everyone here has endured enough. Oh, you're causing trouble? Great, you're fired. Right now, Ryan shouted. Silence. But this time, no one looked away. Carlos, the chef, who had never missed a shift, stepped out of the kitchen, brushing off his apron. If Liam's fired, I quit too. I won't work for a bully. Angela, the youngest server, untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the counter. Same here. Not because Liam's our boss, but because he's the only one here who treats us like people. A barista stepped forward, her voice small but firm. When Mr. Bennett was here, the diner wasn't like this. I remember. He used to ask if we had eaten dinner every night before we closed. A customer stood up, placing money on the table. I'll be back when this place finds its kindness again. Have you ever witnessed something like that? A team once silent out of fear, standing up together because one person dared to speak a fair word. No one chanted slogans. No one held up signs. There was just endurance stretched thin and a small spark of kindness, enough to gather everyone's courage. And in the corner of the diner, as always, the anonymous old man with his $1 cup of coffee sat quietly. But this time, his hands didn't tremble. Harold set his cup down, looking at Liam standing there in the center of that charged room with a gaze filled with respect. That morning, the sky was unusually clear. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows of Bennett's diner, casting a soft yellow glow on the tables, reminiscent of those mornings long ago when Mr. Harold would stand behind the counter, coffee pot in hand, greeting customers with the usual, "Right today." He came back, no longer the trembling old man in a tattered coat, no fake beard, no hat pulled low to hide his face. Just Harold Bennett, the founder of the diner, standing tall in a simple grey suit, eyes bright, hands still bearing the calluses of honest work. The door opened. The familiar chime of the bell rang a sound that was once the heartbeat of this diner's mornings. At first, no one noticed. Just an old man walking in, next to a sharp-eyed woman carrying a leather case, Martha, the long-time accountant, looking as focused as a lawyer headed to court, until Angela, the young server, looked up, her eyes widening, her lips parting. Oh my God! Mr. Bennett. Everything stopped. Customers paused mid-bite. Forks and knives froze. A strange hush swept across the room, as if time itself paused for a moment. Liam, carrying a tray from the kitchen, stopped in his tracks. His tired eyes from sleepless nights spent worrying about losing his job now widened, slowly turning into something that looked almost like hope. Then Ryan came out, phone in hand, still grumbling. "What's everyone staring at? This is a diner, not a museum." He stopped, seeing the man standing in the center of the diner, leaning lightly on a cane, head tilted slightly, waiting for a proper greeting. "You, Uncle Harold. Good morning, Ryan." Harold's voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for everyone to hear each word. "I think we need to have a conversation today." Sure. Let's talk in the office." "No." Harold cut him off, a gentle smile on his lips. "I think this conversation needs to be shared with everyone here." Harold turned to all the employees and customers in the diner. "I'm Harold Bennett. I founded this diner 30 years ago. For the past 6 months, due to health issues, I handed over temporary management to my grandson, Ryan. But I never truly left. Not completely. I've been watching, quietly, observing, and I'm deeply sorry for not speaking up sooner." A few heads lowered. Some nodded softly. Liam stood frozen, tray in hand, as if afraid to believe what was happening. Harold nodded to Martha. She opened her case, pulling out a tablet. On it were videos recorded from the small camera hidden in Harold's old knit cap. Footage of Ryan pocketing cash from the register. Footage of liquor being poured from unlogged bottles. Footage of Ryan yelling at customers, insulting staff, throwing parties at night with the diner's supplies. Ryan's face turned pale. You spied on me. You pretended to be some old man, like a spy." "No, Ryan." Harold remained calm. "I just wanted to see the truth when people thought I wasn't looking." Harold stepped closer, his gaze no longer gentle. "You've embezzled funds, insulted staff, fired people for their age. But more importantly, you've forgotten the most important thing. This diner doesn't just serve food, it holds kindness. And you, for a long time now, have forgotten that. Ryan threw his hands up in protest. This is slander. I could sue. Martha raised a stack of papers. No need to sue. These are legal documents. You are officially terminated with clear evidence, and you are under investigation for embezzlement. At the entrance, Officer Daniels, a regular customer, stood quietly, waiting. No handcuffs, no drama. He simply nodded and said, "We'll escort you to the office to collect your personal belongings." Nothing else. Ryan looked around. No one spoke up for him. No employee looked at him with kindness. And the customers, many of whom had witnessed his abuses, nodded in agreement. He quietly walked into the office, shoulders stiff, like a sinking ship in an ocean of his own making. After a moment of silence, Harold turned back facing the entire diner. "I gave Ryan the keys. But you, the employees, are the ones who have held onto the heart of this place. Someone kept it alive, even when no one asked them to, even at the risk of losing their job. And today, I'm giving the real keys to that person." Liam still stood frozen. He didn't know what to feel in that moment. Something was rising in his chest, a mix of confusion, emotion, and a budding sense of hope. "Mr." Harold turned to him, eyes kind but not soft. His voice rang out, clear, no longer trembling like the old man outside Liam Parker. "I've been watching you all this time, not as an owner, but as someone looking for a successor to the heart of this place." The diner stayed quiet. Staff and customers alike stopped in place. No clatter of utensils, no stirring of coffee, just eyes all on the young server, who had once tiptoed around, covering shifts, wiping down tables, paying for the coffee of a forgetful old man without saying a word. Harold pulled out an envelope thick, with a red wax seal and handwritten script. "Appointment letter, General Manager of Bennett's Diner." Liam stepped back half a step, as if he had misheard. "But I'm just a server." Harold smiled. "That's exactly why. You're the right person. When you gave me your jacket on that freezing night, you didn't know who I was. When you stood up for Jenny, you didn't think about position. When you paid out of your own pocket for a stranger's meal, you did it from your nature. And that can't be taught in any school. Being a leader isn't about giving orders. Being a leader is about setting an example." Martha, still standing quietly beside them, stepped forward and spoke softly. "You won't be alone. We'll guide you through every step, finances, suppliers, paperwork. But the things that make a true leader, you already have." Liam looked around. Angela, the young server he once taught how to carry a tray without spilling, was nodding with a smile. Carlos, the quiet veteran chef, nodded firmly, placing a hand over his heart. Jenny, her face still worried about her son's fever, now had tears in her eyes, whispering, "If it's you, we won't be afraid anymore." Liam took the envelope. His hands trembled, not out of fear, but because he knew this wasn't luck. It came from days of enduring quietly, without losing himself in the wrong. He lifted his head, speaking slowly. "If I accept this job, I want to start over, but not forget what was right. This diner will be a place where everyone is greeted by name, a place where employees aren't afraid of losing hours for putting their family first, a place where even a shy child will be heard, and a place where people don't just come to eat, but to belong. The diner applauded, not loudly, not like a celebration, just a genuine, heartfelt applause from people who had witnessed someone kind do the right thing, without needing an audience. Harold placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "You're not replacing me, Liam. You're continuing what I started, and now I'm passing it on to the one who deserves it." There was no loud music, no balloons, no grand reopening like you see on TV when ownership changes hands. Just a quiet morning where sunlight softly slid through freshly cleaned windows for the first time in months. A small sign was placed at the counter. "The diner is open as usual, but this time the good will be preserved." Liam began his first day in his new role by picking up a broom to sweep the front. He knew what makes people believe isn't the word manager on a name tag, but how you treat each person. Sarah, the hostess, who had been replaced for being too old, was invited back. Her silver hair now welcomed customers at the front, and her smile brought back warm memories of a time when everyone called each other by their real names, not Table 3. Carlos, the veteran chef, no longer cooked alone. He was invited to choose 2 culinary students from the local college to train. I remember Mr. Harold once said, "A dish made with care can heal a quiet sorrow." And it was true. The food began to taste like it used to, not because the ingredients changed, but because the people did. A small wooden board was placed behind the counter, Liam's handwriting in white chalk. "If you need a meal and don't have money, just say so. Someone who once received a jacket has returned, and now we'll keep each other warm in our own way. Do you feel the revival?" It's not loud. It happens when Angela laughs for the first time in months, when a regular brings in an old photo of Mr. Harold to hang on the wall, when the coffee machine once thought broken gets cleaned by Carlos and hums again, like a heartbeat waking up. One afternoon, Liam saw a stranger sitting quietly in the corner watching him for a long time. When Liam approached and asked, "Is there anything I can get you, sir?" the man simply smiled. "I once knew a young man like you 20 years ago, started from waiting tables, gave people the best he had, even when he didn't have much himself. That young man opened a diner, built something beautiful." Liam understood instantly. It was an old friend of Mr. Harold's, someone returning to see if the flames still burned. Returning to normal is one thing, but bringing it back to life with the kindness it was built on is something else entirely. And that's what Liam was doing every day, quietly, without fanfare. He rewrote the menu with the team, kept Mr. Harold's roasted chicken recipe with a note, original recipe kept just as it was. He put back the suggestion box, something Ryan had thrown out, and it was filled the next day, not with complaints, but with notes like, "Thank you for letting me sit an extra hour without rushing me out. My mum says the coffee tastes like it used to. My kid asked for another cookie for the first time." In a small corner behind the kitchen, Liam placed an old wooden chair where Mr. Harold used to sit every afternoon. He didn't tell anyone. But every night, before closing, he placed a cup of hot tea on it. "Because I believe," he whispered to Carlos, "he's still around here, watching, still caring." Carlos chuckled. "If he sees this, he'd be so proud. You might not believe in revival. You might think, what can one person do in a broken system? But I've seen just one person. Just one person keeping the flame alive when the room has gone dark is enough to light up the whole house every morning." Liam arrived earlier than everyone, not to set an example or prove anything. He just felt the need to be there when the first sunlight streamed through the windows, when the coffee machine began its gentle hum, when Carlos sneezed from the cold as he entered the kitchen, when Sarah adjusted the sign for the day's specials, and every morning he glanced at the corner where that old wooden chair sat quietly. The tea on it was replaced each night. No one sat in that chair. No one needed to be told. One day, Angela asked Boss, "Why don't you replace that old chair with a nicer one?" Liam smiled. "Because that chair isn't meant for sitting. It's meant for remembering." Mr. Harold no longer came in every day. His health still needed care, and age could not be defied. But one thing had changed. He no longer worried. He didn't need to intervene, didn't need to direct. He just sat by the window on Friday afternoons, tea in hand, nodding occasionally as he watched Liam talk to the staff, not commanding, but guiding, watching, trusting. You know, he once told Liam, people often think a legacy is a building, a sign, a name. But for me, a legacy is how people treat each other, even when no one is watching. Liam stayed silent. He understood, just as he understood why, after all these years, Mr. Harold still came, still sat in that same spot, even without running things anymore. Because a legacy doesn't need to be in charge to remain. It lives in the small things we do every day, over and over, until it becomes culture. Bennett's Diner was no longer just a place to survive. It was a place to belong. Every Wednesday night, free meals were given to the homeless. No big announcement, no cameras. Every Tuesday morning, Sarah brought 2 extra carafes of coffee to the nearby nursing home so the elders don't feel forgotten. Every weekend, a student was accepted into an internship program to learn everything from cooking to serving to management. And whenever the weather turned cold, old coats were hung on a hook in the corner. Take one if you need it. No questions asked. One day, a stranger walked in a weathered face, backpack in hand. No one knew him, but as he quietly sat down, staring into his hot tea, Liam walked over, gently placing a cookie on his plate. "First time here, sir." The man nodded, smiling softly. "I was just passing through, but I heard there was something different about this place." Liam smiled back. "Well, it's just a small diner, but we try to make sure everyone who walks in feels seen. Have you ever stopped somewhere you'd never been and within minutes felt like you didn't have to feel alone? You don't know anyone's name, but the way they look at you, makes you feel a little less alone. If you have, maybe you've stepped into a place like Bennett's, and if you haven't, believe that such places do exist, because I've seen it. I've written it back into existence, piece by piece, from the smallest details. One day, Mr. Harold left an envelope on Liam's desk before leaving earlier than usual. Inside was a handwritten note. You don't need to become me. You just need to keep what made this place what it is. When you wipe down the windows, smile at a stranger, wash dishes when the staff is short, you're already doing it. And if one day you're too tired, unsure if you're still on the right path, sit down, have a cup of tea, and look at that old chair in the corner. It will remind you why you started. Liam folded the note. He didn't cry. He just refilled the kettle, replacing the tea on that old chair this time with both hands. That winter, the snow came earlier than usual. The entire